This moment carries a very different feeling. Not clear right away, but deep enough for you to realize you are no longer standing still. Pisces begins to notice subtle shifts all around. Things that once felt distant are slowly taking shape. A new direction comes into view. An old value is seen again through a different lens. And at the same time, your emotions no longer follow the familiar path. Someone steps in with sincerity. Someone else remains, but carries a heavy sense of attachment. Between these two currents, Pisces starts to understand something important. Not every presence comes from love. This is a phase where life is not asking you to move faster. It only asks that you stay aware enough to notice the moment beginning to shift, and brave enough to listen to the faint vibration as the first door, quietly, begins to open. Pisces may not be able to name it right away, but the feeling itself is deeply familiar, like standing at the edge of the ocean, just before the tide begins to turn. The surface is still calm, the breeze remains gentle, yet somewhere beneath it all, the current has already changed. It is no longer a vague sense of waiting, and not quite impatience either, just a quiet awareness that you are no longer standing where you once were. Lately, Pisces seems to notice the smallest details. A chance encounter, a sentence that sounds ordinary, yet echoes long after it is spoken, a thought that returns again and again during the quietest moments. None of these signs feel large enough to point to anything specific, but when they come together, they form a steady feeling, as if life itself is gently guiding you in a new direction. This moment does not arrive loudly. There is no call to action, no dramatic event. It comes the way daylight slowly shifts at the end of the day. You never quite notice the exact second sunset begins. You only realize the sky no longer looks the same. For Pisces, it is much the same. Something within begins to revisit what was once accepted, what was endured, what was taken for granted. Not to assign blame, but to understand that you have already traveled far enough in the old chapter. You may start to sense that you have grown in ways you never fully acknowledged. Not because you became tougher, but because you learned how to listen to yourself. Emotions that were once dismissed now speak more clearly. Boundaries that were once ignored appear naturally, without resistance. And in that space, there is no judgment, only awareness. Turning points rarely come with answers. They arrive with questions instead. Where am I going? What truly matters now? Am I holding on out of love, or simply out of familiarity? For Pisces, these questions do not rush in all at once. They move slowly, giving you enough time to sit with yourself, enough time to realize that living on autopilot is no longer possible. This is also when your intuition becomes more refined. Not to predict the future, but to recognize the present. What makes you feel lighter? What weighs you down? What causes you to shrink? And what allows you to remain fully yourself? Life is not asking you to change immediately. It simply invites you to face the feelings rising within you, without avoidance, without haste. In that quiet space, a door seems to vibrate softly, not as an irresistible invitation, and not as a promise. Just the sense that if you continue forward with honesty, something will gradually begin to open. No one knows exactly what it is, and perhaps there is no need to know just yet. For Pisces, the moment everything begins to shift is not an ending. It feels more like the pause, just before taking a deep breath, not yet moving forward, but already prepared, not fully leaving, yet no longer staying as before. And within that stillness, another journey quietly starts to take shape, born from the most honest act of all, listening deeply to yourself. After recognizing the shift happening within, Pisces begins to see the world around them through a different lens. What once felt familiar no longer stays fixed in the same place. Small details in everyday life suddenly stand out. A brief offer, mentioned in passing, an idea that was once set aside, returns, now wearing a new shape. A skill believed to be outdated is brought up again at just the right moment. Not everything is clear, but it is enough to make you pause and think. During this phase, gold is not defined by numbers or tangible possessions. It appears as a quiet realization that what you have carried for so long may be more valuable than you ever assumed. Some qualities were hidden beneath years of self-sacrifice. Some abilities were delayed by circumstance. Some choices were postponed because you placed the needs of others ahead of your own. Now, those parts slowly come into view, not loudly, not urgently, but clearly enough that they can no longer be ignored. Pisces may not yet be ready to call this an opportunity. There is no need to label it as a financial turning point or a concrete achievement. What matters more is the feeling that you are being seen differently, perhaps by others, perhaps by yourself. When perspective changes, value naturally takes on a new form. What once seemed ordinary is now placed exactly where it belongs. This moment does not rush Pisces into action. It feels more like holding something precious in your hands with enough time to sense its weight. You turn it over, you examine it. You wonder how long it has been there. You question why it took this long to notice it. There is no right answer, no wrong one either. Only a growing honesty in the way you look at yourself. From another angle, gold may also represent a new balance between giving and holding back. Pisces is used to offering everything without keeping score. But now, you begin to understand that honoring your own worth does not make you selfish. On the contrary, it allows you to stand more firmly as you continue to engage with the world. When you know what you carry, you also know where it belongs. Not every open door requires immediate entry. Some thresholds ask only that you stand there for a while, long enough to sense whether you are ready. This phase offers Pisces that quiet choice. No one is urging you forward. No one is pushing you. There is only the feeling that if you keep turning away from what is slowly revealing itself, you may miss a very real part of who you are. What matters is that this emerging value is deeply connected to your inner life. The more clearly you recognize your external worth, the more you understand your internal limits. You begin to distinguish between sacrifice rooted in care and exhaustion born from old habits. That awareness does not weigh you down. Instead, it brings a quiet steadiness. Gold does not knock to measure wealth or lack. It arrives to ask whether you are ready to face your true value. And whatever the answer may be, it does not need to be spoken aloud. Right now, all that is required is for Pisces to pause for a moment to fully feel what is present before the journey gently carries you into a deeper experience, still unfolding. As the inner layers slowly begin to fall away, Pisces may notice a new presence entering, very gently. No display, no introduction, just a quiet arrival, close enough that you no longer feel the need to stay guarded. This connection does not come with intensity or sudden infatuation. It comes from a familiarity that is hard to name, as if two people understood each other before a single word was spoken. What makes it different is that it does not ask Pisces to become someone else. There is no need to prove anything, no need to hold yourself together, no need to soften or toughen up, to be accepted. You are simply allowed to be, exactly as you are, and that natural ease creates a rare sense of safety, a space where your breath slows down, where the heart no longer braces for every small reaction. You may notice that this closeness carries very few promises. It does not paint a brilliant future. It does not predict what will come next. And because of that, it feels real. Two people meet, not to fill a void, but to share the space of their own lives. No one is there to rescue anyone, just a quiet coexistence, rooted in respect. In moments of conversation, Pisces may sense a different kind of listening. Not listening in order to respond, but listening in order to understand. Silences feel comfortable. Words do not need polishing. Everything moves at an unhurried pace, slow enough for emotions to settle and land. And within that slowness, a small sense of trust begins to form, not loudly, but steadily. This connection does not cause Pisces to lose themselves. On the contrary, it brings forward the parts, once hidden out of fear of being too much for others, the delicate emotions, the deeper thoughts, the needs once labeled as excessive. Here, none of that is dismissed. It is met with respect, as if each part naturally belongs within this bond. Love arriving in this way does not disrupt life. It does not pull you away from your own path. It walks alongside you, close enough to support, far enough not to take over. And that balance creates a sense of healing, not because wounds disappear, but because you no longer have to hide them. Pisces may not call this something extraordinary. It may feel like nothing more than a meeting at the right time. Yet deep down, you understand that the feeling of being fully yourself next to another person does not come often. It is not born from perfection, but from honesty on both sides. This bond does not demand immediate decisions. It does not rush you to name it. It simply exists, clear enough to remind you that love does not always require sacrifice or loss. Sometimes, care is as simple as allowing one another to live true to one's nature without adding, without taking away. And when Pisces allows themselves to remain in that space, even for a brief moment, a very quiet realization may arise that after so many cycles, the heart has finally touched its most gentle truth. Not to hold tightly, not to possess, only to know that you are worthy of a connection that does not ask you to change your shape. When a new connection arrives, carrying gentleness, Pisces may also sense, very clearly, another pull still lingering behind. It is not loud. It does not show itself openly, yet it is persistent enough to occasionally make your heart sink, as if someone is still holding an invisible thread, unwilling to let go. This pull does not always belong to the present. At times, it comes from an earlier chapter, a familiar image, a bond that once ran deep, but was never truly brought to a close. That presence does not always take the shape of pain. Often, it wears the face of familiarity, a sense of closeness that softens your resolve, a voice that once felt intimate, a look that made you believe you had a responsibility to stay. And because it feels familiar, Pisces may struggle to tell the difference between genuine care and a grip born from the fear of being left behind. Those who cannot release rarely say so out loud. They do not need to admit it. They simply exist in a way that makes you feel as though you still owe something, a message that arrives at the wrong moment, An old memory brought up again. A silence heavy with implication. No one directly asks you to return, yet every sign points toward keeping you right where you have always been, where they feel secure. Pisces may once have believed that long presence meant love, but in this phase, a different awareness begins to form. Not every attachment grows from care. Some connections endure because of the fear of losing control, fear of losing a role, fear of losing the sense of still being important in someone else's life. And that fear, even when unspoken, carries its own weight. What troubles Pisces is not who is right or wrong. It is the sensation of being pulled backward each time you attempt to move ahead. Whenever you begin to soften toward something new, that pull returns, causing you to question whether you are being selfish, whether leaving means abandoning someone. These questions are not easy to answer, especially for a heart accustomed to placing other people's feelings first. Yet within that tension, Pisces begins to notice something subtle. When a connection causes you to shrink, when it asks you to suppress your true self, it is no longer a healthy companionship. It becomes a form of binding, where your presence is kept, not to grow together, but to preserve what once was. Obsession rarely comes from cruelty. Most often, it is born from wounds left unhealed, from fears left unexamined. But understanding this does not mean you must continue to carry it. Pisces slowly learns that compassion does not require self-sacrifice. Understanding does not demand that you remain where you no longer belong. This moment does not force you to sever ties immediately. It simply invites you to look directly at your own feelings. When you are near this person, do you feel lighter or heavier? Are you free to be yourself? Or do you find yourself shrinking? Do you feel open or bound by expectations never spoken aloud? These questions are not meant to judge. They exist to help you recognize what is quietly draining your energy, standing between new tenderness and an old pull. Pisces faces a lesson of great depth, not a lesson about right or wrong choices, but about honesty with your own emotions. When you allow yourself to see those invisible threads clearly, blame begins to fall away. What remains is understanding that some connections need to be set down, not because love is absent, but because you have arrived at a different stretch of the road. And within that realization, a new space begins to form. A space where your breath deepens, where your steps slow, and where you prepare for a decision yet to come, not rushed, but unmistakably clear. As the journey continues to unfold ahead, after recognizing the pull behind and the gentleness waiting ahead, Pisces enters a phase that feels quiet, yet deeply profound. The intense emotional surges fade. The sharp confusion softens. In their place, a long stretch of stillness appears, where you begin to understand that not everything is meant to travel to the end of the road together. This stillness does not force anything. No one stands before you, demanding a decision. Life simply places two paths, side by side, close enough for you to see them, far enough that only you can take the step. And within that silence, a realization slowly takes shape, that if you continue holding tightly to what belongs to the past, there will be no space for what is trying to enter. Pisces is used to compromise. You are used to keeping everything in a fragile balance, so no one gets hurt, so no connection breaks apart. But now, you begin to see the limits of that way of living. Some choices cannot satisfy everyone. Some crossroads do not allow you to remain in the middle for long, and not choosing is also a choice. even when you would rather not admit it. The lesson here is not about abandoning anyone. It is about whether you are willing to stay true to yourself when you continue carrying ties that cause you to shrink. You slowly lose touch with your inner truth, not because you are weak, but because you have grown accustomed to placing other people's needs above your own feelings. This phase gently reveals that growth does not always require sacrifice. Sometimes it begins with the courage to say no very softly. Pisces may feel a deep ache at the thought of letting go. That feeling is real, and it does not need to be denied. At the same time, another awareness may surface. When a connection requires you to constantly explain yourself, to reassure, to carry responsibility for someone else's emotions, it is no longer healthy companionship. It becomes an emotional burden hidden beneath the comfort of familiarity. Choosing your true value does not make you cold. On the contrary, it requires immense honesty and courage. Honesty with your own feelings. Courage to accept that not everyone can walk with you into the next stretch of the journey. Some people are only meant for a season. Acknowledging this does not erase what once existed. It simply places everything where it truly belongs. As Pisces begins to prioritize inner peace, connections that no longer fit start to loosen on their own. There is no need for sudden endings, no need for dramatic declarations. You simply stop feeding energy into bonds that leave you drained. The change unfolds slowly, but unmistakably. And within that clarity, a new kind of freedom emerges. Lighter, quieter, less demanding. This lesson of choice does not require certainty about the future. It only invites you to stand with what allows you to live more truthfully in the present. When you choose to honor your worth, you take nothing away from anyone. You simply stop offering parts of yourself that no longer belong. And in doing so, you create space for life to rearrange itself in the most natural way. Pisces moves through this phase, not with triumph, but with maturity. Not because every answer is known, but because you have found the courage not to hold both paths at once. And in the moment, you finally loosen your grip. Another door slowly comes into view. It does not push. It does not call out. It simply waits, quietly, for you to step forward. When you are ready, after the choices have been quietly set down, Pisces enters a very different state. Not excitement, not a sense of victory, just a slow release, spreading gently, like stepping out of a room you stayed in for far too long, and breathing fresh air for the first time without having to explain yourself to anyone. This lightness does not come because every problem disappears. It comes because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. The emotions you once shouldered for others, the responsibilities that never belonged to you, the expectations that asked you to bend until you no longer fit your own shape. When those weights are set down, space appears. And within that space, Pisces realizes that peace is not a reward. It is the natural state of living in alignment with your own rhythm. Being richer now is not only about what can be measured, it shows up in how you relate to time, in how you spend your energy, in how you choose to give attention to what truly nourishes you. No longer pulled backward, you gain the space to recognize the value you have been building over a long stretch of life, value you once carried, without ever stopping to fully see. At this point, Pisces no longer needs to prove anything. No need to explain why you have changed. No need to convince anyone that you are worthy. Clarity arrives naturally, like morning light, It does not announce itself, yet it reaches every corner. You know what you need. You know what no longer fits. And that understanding carries a quiet kind of steadiness. Greater clarity also means accepting that not everyone will understand the path you choose. Some will notice you are different. Some will no longer find their old place in your life. There may be a trace of sadness in that, but it no longer leaves you lost, because you understand that people can only walk with you as far as they are willing to grow. After the turning point, Pisces does not become distant. You simply become more discerning. You choose to stay close to what feeds your inner life. You choose connections rooted in respect and balance. You choose a pace of living that does not ask you to trade inner calm for the feeling of being needed. This is not closing yourself off. It is a conscious way of keeping the door open. The journey does not end with a grand statement. It settles into a quiet return, a return to a sense of fullness that does not depend on anything external, a return to trust in yourself, a return to listening to the subtle signals you once overlooked, not to control life, but to walk alongside it with greater awareness. Pisces, after the shift, does not need to know everything that lies ahead. You only need to know that you are moving with honesty, and that is enough. Enough to continue, enough to pause when needed, enough to open your heart when it feels safe, enough to let go when you sense the time has come. If there is one thing worth carrying forward, it may be permission. Permission to be gentler with yourself. Permission to let life unfold naturally. Permission to welcome what aligns. And permission to leave behind what no longer resonates with respect. This journey does not claim certainty. It simply offers a different way of seeing. And as this story rests here, Pisces can carry that feeling forward without rushing, without waiting, living each day in quiet alignment with your true value in your own way.